Hi all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name's Eliza. I'm a disabled person and I make content all about disability awareness, LGBTQ+ positivity and lifestyle things every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. So if you're new here, hello, welcome, come in. Nice to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about why disabled actors should play disabled characters. So if you're interested in that, stick around. Over the last week, we have seen three separate films be released that are starring able-bodied people playing disabled characters. We have seen Sia's Music, we have seen a film called Asia, and a film called A Year in the Life. So you may have seen Sia's Music get a fair amount of backlash, and Sia very nicely showed that the absolute worst way to respond to somebody criticising your work. She claimed to have done years of research into her film Music, which, if you aren't aware, is about an autistic girl. It looks like finding what looks like her confidence. Only the trailer has been released, but unfortunately she has hired a neurotypical person to play the role, and she had claimed to do years of research but supports Autism Speaks, which is a company that many autistic people don't support, and many call it a hate group due to the fact that they're looking to cure autism. And when many autistic people called Sia out and said, hey, I could have done the role, Sia responded and said that maybe you're just a bad actor to an autistic person, really not good. She used functioning labels, which if you have done any research into the autistic community, many people don't like functioning labels. She refused to use the word disabled and use words such as special abilities. Really, no. FYI, if you want to create something and in the process of doing it you offend someone, don't tell them to pay you first, as Sia did, before getting annoyed. Apologise, and oh Sia, we are still waiting for that apology. But why is it such an issue? Why did it feel like the whole world, well, at least my whole world, yes, Ables, we're still waiting for you to speak out on the Sia issue, because currently all I hear is crickets, call Sia out. It's just acting, right? You don't actually cut actors if they scrape their knee, for example. You know, if an actor is going to be sick, you don't actually make them be sick, etc, etc. So why is it such a big deal? Well, in my opinion, and of course this video is just my opinion, and as always the comments are open, so please do let me know your thoughts on this down below. I personally don't think that able-bodied people at the moment should be playing disabled roles. Why? Because the world currently isn't equal. So whenever we see disabled people in films, etc., we often see them as like evil. So like in most kids films you'll see that villains are often disabled. They may walk with a cane, they may have a hook, etc. And yeah, it's not great. Have you ever noticed how many Disney villains have got like a scar or a facial disfigurement as well? Yeah, Disney, we're looking at you, and yet you couldn't name a single disabled Disney princess, not one. So the world is not equal. Every time that we may see a disabled character, it's to kind of inspire able-bodied people. So dare I say it, inspiration porn. They purely exist to make able-bodied people feel good, or even worse, they aren't even labelled as disabled. They are disabled COVID, cough cough. Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, we know that you're disabled coded. If you want to know more about like disabled coding, or particularly autism in the media, which is obviously what Sheldon is coded as, I will leave Jessica Out of the Closet's video down below about autism in the media, and she has got a great series going on at the moment about disabilities in the media, so I really recommend checking that series out. If disabled people aren't being portrayed as evil, they're often being portrayed as sad or strong. A Fault in Our Stars comes to mind when I think of that idea of two dying people falling in love, and it's that kind of romantic story while able-bodied people sit in the cinema and weep and cry about the fact that it's so sad, yet secretly thinking, thank God it's not. Films like this, although they may seem harmless, adds to the idea that somebody who is dying must be strong. They must live life in the moment, which is great, but not really realistic. People who are dying are allowed to waste, very much in quotation marks here, time. They don't have to be strong all the time. They don't have to be weak all the time either. Claire Wineland has spoken about this before. She was an amazing YouTuber who spoke very openly about her experience being a young person who is dying, and I will leave her YouTube video link down below. She was an absolutely amazing person, so really recommend checking out. If you are disabled, you don't have to be strong all the time. And films like this are designed to kind of make able-bodied people get off their asses a bit and think, oh, maybe I should do that thing because there isn't that much time left, etc, etc. Because, you know, life is short. But do we really need disabled people to encourage able-bodied people? My life is pretty boring. I like dogs, I eat chocolate, I cry, I have bad days, I'm grumpy. It isn't really inspiring. Yeah, I've been called inspiring for literally just existing. Sorry Dave, me picking up carrots in the vegetable aisle is not inspiring. I will never forget the time that I was introduced to non-inspiring disabled media. Obviously, I didn't really clock on about Disney characters having a disability. It didn't really the correlation didn't come together in my mind. But the first time that I saw somebody who was very clearly speaking about their disability was for Stand Up for Cancer, I believe. I'll be honest, to me, most of those programs are kind of just a whole load of inspiration porn just shoved together. But there was a young lady who appeared on screen to talk about her experience with cancer. She can't have been maybe over 25, I would say, so she was pretty young. She sat there crying out in pain. She was telling us that she felt sick and was just feeling really unwell and not great. She didn't say that she was strong. She didn't say that she was going to beat this. She was emotional and raw. It made me feel really uncomfortable. It felt strange to see someone who was sick not inspire me for the first time. But she was right. She was tired. She didn't exist to inspire me. She didn't exist to make me feel better. And of course, since then, I've learned about kind of inspiration porn as my health has got worse and I've kind of become more a part of the community, etc. But it was really refreshing to see at the time. It was refreshing to feel uncomfortable for the first time and see a proper, realistic idea of what disability can look like at some times. No, disability does not look like that all the time, but it does sometimes, and it's okay to show that and visually kind of see that. Of course, it was completely heartbreaking and I really wish her well, and I hope that she's doing okay, but for me it was a really big turning point on my education within disability. For me, it was actual representation. It was what I feel. It was when I am breaking down in pain. It was me being seen and heard in a media. It's also too important to remember that disabled people are not weak. They can be strong. Now you're sat at home thinking, well, you just said that they aren't strong, and now you're saying that they are. Well, both are true. We are just the same as anybody else. Sometimes we're strong, sometimes we're weak, we carry on with pain, ableism, go to work, etc, etc, and sometimes we cry, we fail, etc. But that's just called being human. There's no permanent state for somebody, and what society sees as being strong or weak is highly messed up in my opinion as it is. So yeah, I've been at my strongest sometimes when I'm weeping on the floor. So disabled people can be both. They can be strong, weak, and also just none of those things, and that's okay. If we saw actual representation of disabled people across all platforms, we would be much less annoyed when able-bodied people played us. But the issue is that disabled people are not hired in roles for able-bodied people because they're disabled, yet they aren't hired in roles of disabled characters because they're disabled. It's a character that literally exists for us, yet we still aren't hired. So there's a real issue with unemployment within the disabled community. Currently 48% of people who are in poverty have a disabled person in the household. Most famous people tend to not talk openly about their disabilities, etc. They often don't tell people that they have a disability. Now, I'm not saying that they should be forced to talk about their disability. I purely believe and truly believe that a person should only talk about their disability should they feel comfortable to, etc, 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 and nobody should be forced to do that. But I do feel that many disabled people feel that they must almost hide their disability a bit. Why? Because of able-bodied people being ableist. Because, you know, disability is seen as a weakness, and if a person shows that they're disabled, maybe they'll look weak and they'll lose fans, etc, etc, etc. So it does mean that often we see that disabled people who are in the media don't openly talk about it, but because we don't have any equal representation anywhere, that can be really difficult to deal with. Another issue with able-bodied people, or people who have not lived with a disability that they are trying to portray, for etc. Let's remember that Sia is disabled and that disabled people can be ableist, is that they cannot possibly know what it is like to live with a disability, or that particular disability, without living it. So does that mean that they must hire a disabled actor? Well, I guess that comes back to that idea of the fact that many disabled people aren't hired due to the fact that they're disabled, etc, etc. But at the very, very, very least, if you're going to make a film about a certain disability, disability, let's say EDS, which is a disability that I have, you should hire people with EDS to work on the set. You should talk to people with EDS. You should research about EDS so that you have a strong understanding of the disability that you are trying to portray before you make your film, for example. If you wanted to write a story about London and Southeast London, etc., etc., you would talk to people from Southeast London. You wouldn't go to somebody in the North Pole and say, we're making a film about London, can you be in it? Yeah, maybe they would portray what they think London is like, but they're not going to have a good portrayal of what it's actually like unless they've actually been there and lived there, etc., etc. Now, take that analogy and use it for disabled people. Without using disabled people, it just becomes performative. It can be kind of almost like mocking, because you can get things wrong and that person with the disability isn't able to say, hey, that's wrong. So things can kind of end up getting missed and lost in translation. You can almost end up mocking people without even meaning to, and it just doesn't become proper representation. It also can kind of lead into the harmful stereotypes of disabled people, that we can't work, that we're weak, or that we're strong, etc., etc., and just doesn't portray us correctly. So it doesn't really make any sense to not hire the person with the disability. When you don't hire disabled people to play disabled characters, you can also end up falling into ableist tropes. I mean, you wouldn't portray a character of a certain race and then ask somebody of a different race to play that race, because that would be wrong. You wouldn't get it across, it would seem as mocking, etc., etc. And that's kind of the same thing with disabled people. You can very, very easily end up mocking us, falling into the classic stereotypes of what a disabled person is, for example, an autistic person in music, and it just means that you can end up kind of adding those horrible stereotypes to the community and end up hurting the community that you are actively trying to help. What about the idea that it's too hard for a disabled person to be hired, or it would be cruel? #see ya to hire a disabled person. Well, to that I say it's complete bull. Disabled people live with everyday struggles, and yes, they vary from person to person, but their struggles are all the same, and we survive. We are so strong. Yes, I know I said that we also weren't strong at the beginning, but we are at certain points, and we can cope with being on a film set. Many of us are good at communicating our needs, and you should be good at adapting your set. It's really that simple. If the set isn't working, change it. If you're about to fit George Clooney in his main character suit and it didn't fit, you wouldn't shout out and scream, we must get an actor to fit the suit. You would get a new suit for Mr. Clooney, who's, you know, unhappy that you made the wrong size suit. You wouldn't just change the actor. So why would you do it for disabled people? If a disabled person is saying, yeah, this isn't working, then change it and adapt it. What about the classic, but we want a big name in our film, and hiring a disabled person would mean that we won't have that big name? This one drives me mad. Look, if you want a big name, hire somebody to be the sidekick. Hire somebody to be a different character in the role that isn't disabled, but hire a disabled person for the disabled character. It then allows that disabled person to be seen, maybe access more work, and then breaking away the media that disabled people must just play disabled roles, because I would love to be in a world where we just see all different types of people playing all different types of roles, as long as it's of course culturally appropriate, and that we're not just seeing disabled people just playing disabled roles, etc. But at the moment we're not seeing disabled people anywhere. Generally disabled actors are just not hired because they're disabled, etc. So if you want a famous actor, then cast them in another role in your movie and hire a disabled person to play the role of the disabled character. It's literally that simple. But wouldn't it be traumatic for a disabled person to play the role? Well, this is a classic. We hear this one all the time. That idea that disabled people are so weak that they couldn't possibly relive what they've been through. Well, maybe for some disabled people that's right, but not all. And to be honest, they probably just wouldn't apply if they didn't think they were able to cope with the role. Many disabled people are aware of what they can and can't cope with, etc., etc. Also, many films are kind of traumatic. They include things like violence, sexual assault, etc., etc., and actors still take on the role. We should be allowing trauma to be treated correctly within a film set. If somebody is struggling with trauma, they should be able to speak to somebody. Same with disabled people. If there's something that they feel might be traumatic, they should have counselling and support on set to ensure that they're as happy as possible. Disabled people are able to communicate and say, yeah, this is what's working, this isn't what's working, whichever way that they communicate. And so we shouldn't just say that it's too traumatic for them. As somebody who has a lot of trauma around their disability, I would still play a role of somebody that has EDS in a film, because it's important to me to get proper representation of disability out there and to kind of show the world what disability actually looks like. And even though it would probably be traumatic for me, I would go into that knowing that it would be traumatic. And also actors can kind of adapt things. So if they're going into a film and they say, oh, you know, I feel a bit uncomfortable about that, you can adapt it and go from there. As I said at the beginning, maybe if we had proper representation of disabled people across all of our media, we would feel less strongly about this. We'd be less annoyed if filmmakers did proper research and built a proper understanding and hired people who have the particular disability to work on set, to be seen, etc. It would be less annoying, but currently we don't. Most films that have disabled characters in are purely there to make able-bodied people feel better and think, oh, I'm so pleased I'm not like that, or to present us as evil and something that you don't want to be. We recently saw this in the most recent film Witches, starring Anne Hathaway, which showed a poster of the witch's hands who had a limb difference. And as I said at the beginning, many kids' films have disabled people in that are portrayed as evil, etc, etc. And to me, this just showed how deeply ableism is woven into our society. Anne Hathaway did since apologise, and of course I'm not part of the limb difference community, so it's not up to me to accept that apology. But I will say that I am confused that at no point did anybody on that set stop and think for a second, is this right? But again, it just shows how deeply ableism runs. So I asked some of you at home why it's important for you to be seen in the media as a disabled person, and this is what you said. Disabled actors need a chance, and without it, they'll never be seen. This is so important. We are so often pushed aside for being disabled that we're never able to show our talent, we're never seen, and we should be given a chance because we are amazing people with great skills. It needs to be authentic and real. Yes, we literally are the best to tell us our story. We are the best people to tell you about the disability that we live with every day. We are better than a charity or a doctor who have done 2 hours research. We live with it all the time and we can cope with it. So please ask us to represent our own disabilities. We have so little representation as it is. Yes, we really have no representation at all, and we need it. We need all of the reputation we can get, not fake representation. So please hire disabled actors. We are all so different. This is so true. If you hire 2 people to work on your set about a film about EDS, for example, you're never going to get a full understanding of EDS because we're all so different. So you need to ask multiple people. And getting this data is so easy. You can literally just send out mass emails and you will get responses. You can speak to universities, disability charities, disability groups, etc, etc. There's so many of us, and many of us are very willing to help. So please ask us and don't just take like 2 people's advice. We can't just take the mask off. Yes, this is so true. My disability is not a costume. It's not something that I can step away with when I go home. It's not something that when I go to a premiere I can look amazing standing up in a dress, although disabled people look amazing in a dress, but you know what I mean. I can just go to a premiere and be able-bodied and feel fine the whole time, etc, etc. I would still struggle, and I will struggle for the rest of my life. And disabled people are so often called fakers, particularly people who have dynamic disability, that to me, using an able-bodied person who can then just take that mask off almost adds that idea that people with dynamic disabilities are faking because one day they may use a cane and the next day they may not, etc. So to me, it can kind of just add to that stereotype as well. So there you have it. That's why I think the disabled actors should play disabled roles. But of course, let me know what you think down below. Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? Let me know. If you like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you do want to keep up to date with me outside of YouTube, please follow me at Disabled Eliza across all social medias. Thank you so much for watching this video. Look after all of you, stay safe, wash those hands, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.